will start the recording again, and then this recording stop. Let us wait for others, and then I will start. Okay, others are joining one by one. Let us wait for them. Hello, am I audible? Okay, I think we should start. The other people they can join one by one. I think we should start. So today is itself is an introductory lecture on the computational fluid dynamics and heat transfer course. So today we are going to discuss about what are the. I think you can switch off your mic and then when asking question you can turn it on. Otherwise that causes a disruption when I'm talking. Okay, I think Mokshil Shah can switch off his mic. Okay. So today I'm going to discuss about the computational fluid dynamics and heat transfer. So do you have any question, Mokshil? Uh, Therefore, we are going to discuss about what are the different aspects and how we use CFD in the in the chemical process industry. And in chemical engineering process industry, we see that there are different applications like the uh, oil and gas, chemical, petrochemicals, polymers, plastics, pharmaceuticals, agrochemicals, food and biotechnology. And there are other fields also, typical various applications of these kind of things. And the different mass transfer and the heat transfer equipments we use during these processes are basically these stirred vessel, bubble or slurry bubble column reactors, packed or trickle bed reactors, and the fluidized bed reactors. So stirred vessel is basically we are filling a CSTL with that of a liquid, and then we are passing gas from the bottom of the reactor, and then we are mixing it, and which causes a reaction between the gas phase and the liquid phase, and going to that of the bubbly bubble or the slurry bubble column reactors. So bubble column is basically there are two phases. One is the gas phase, another one is the liquid phase, where the gas and the liquid phase comes in contact with each other and they react. So that can be a co-current one, that can be a counter-current one, depending upon the application. And slurry bubble column reactor, in that case, we have three phases. So one is gas, another one is liquid, another one is solid. So this gas and the liquid and the solid, the three phases basically react with each other. The solid can be a catalyst and the gas and the liquid are basically reacting with each other. And going to the packed or the trickle bed reactor. So typically the gas actually that can be co-current and counter-current, and the liquid actually spreads on the solid bed and the gas comes in a co-current or the counter-current direction, but the gas and the liquid basically react with each other. And these fluidized bed reactors where there is a the bed is filled with or the reactor is filled with solid particles, and then gas actually gets injected from the bottom of the bed, and these bubbles get formed where the gas actually comes in contact with the solid itself, and then they react and the product is being formed and it goes out of the reactor. Okay, so depending upon these are the very basic fundamentals or very basic description of the different reactors we use. Depending upon the application itself, we can change it, we can modify it according to our needs. So there are so one of the thing in these chemical reactors is basically we want to have a better performance or performance enhancement. We want to increase the efficiency of the reactor. So which is better synthesis, better design and optimal operation, better process control, etc. etc. So how to do it? Uh, One thing I'm asking that am I audible or the screen is visible? Any one of you can confirm? Okay, the tempo is good, right? I'm going slowly, by the way. Okay. So going to the industrial multiphase reactors, this is actually gas liquid solid slurry reactor, which is used for converting the thin gas to that of the liquid fuels. So these are the pictures of different gas solid liquid reactors or gas solid fluidized bed reactors. These are the pictures of it. So then going to that of the process intensification. So our conventional emphasis is basically, or what we want to do in case of reactors is basically we want to push the performance limit of the existing processes. So if it is giving a conversion efficiency of 40%, we want to have it like 80%, 90%. So more the process yield, more it is beneficial for you for a given amount of reactant itself. And in order to achieve maximum efficiency and minimum waste or emission or minimum byproduct itself, we actually want to modify these reactors. And if you want to modify these reactors, you should have a very good understanding of what goes inside the reactor. So in this industrial reactor itself, we want to we have to modify it in order to have a better efficiency. So what we have to do is basically the development of compact and efficient reactors or process equipments and cost competitive environmentally benign process, which are basically environment friendly process so that it doesn't have too much emission. By the way, today we are discussing about nowadays we are discussing about carbon capture, where the carbon is basically the carbon dioxide is captured by using tertiary amine, and which basically results in that of the less pollution itself. So those kind of aspects are basically included uh, in the main process itself to make it more environmental friendly. Going to that of the conventional plant itself, so you know that this kind of plant exists in the conventional way. But one of the future aspect we want to have is basically make it much more compact, make it much more environment friendly. So this is actually a cartoon of how the future process plant may look like. Uh, Going to that of the process intensification itself. So you have seen this kind of mass transfer equipment where we use this kind of structured packings or monoliths, where the main objective is to increase the surface area or the contact between the gas phase and the liquid phase itself. This kind of structured reactors are basically used, so which increases the specific surface area. And going to that of the microfluidic reactors or the microfluidic devices. So typically here we consider we decrease the channel width itself so that the surface forces actually come into play. They are more dominant in this region, and therefore by manipulating the forces, the surface forces, since if I decrease the area, the sizes itself, the size of the channel, which is of the micron level in case of micro reactor, the specific surface area increases. And the specific surface area increases actually causes the enhancement of the heat and the mass transfer. So it actually makes the surface forces to be a dominant one compared to that of the other forces which are present in the domain, maybe the inertial force, the inertial force, the gravitational force. Compared to them, the surface force actually become much more dominant. And so here you can see the picture of different microchannels. So microstructure reactor or heat exchanger. So these are micron level heat exchangers. And typical microchannels look like this, which is basically a lab on chip kind of things. And this is a microreactor plus heat exchanger, where the two fluid actually come into contact with each other and then they kind of exchange heat between the two fluid by using a microchannel. And this one is a falling film microreactor, where we kind of inject gas and the liquid. The liquid actually forms a film here. The gas comes in contact with it and then they react and they come out as a product. And this one is a micro heat exchanger. So typically a compact version of this one. So multiple microchannels are present where the two phases or the gas or the liquid phase or the liquid phase or gas phase actually comes in contact with each other and they exchange heat between them. This being much more efficient because these are on the micron level where the specific surface area increases. So here the surface forces in this region, the surface forces are much more dominant. So do you have any question up till now? Anyone? Okay. Okay. So going to the design and the scale up of the process equipment or the reactors itself. So here I'm going to give you a picture that what is the difference between the experiments, the first order models and the CFD. So going to the experiment itself, so one of the things which actually we all have faced, if you are actually in PhD or MTech itself, and also in BTech, you have seen that they are basically expensive and time consuming in nature. So you should have a sensor, you should have the whole setup itself, and it is also time consuming because you have to go through multiple iterations and then you have to see whether the sensors are working fine or not, the data you are getting they are reliable or not. And then if we go to the models itself, the first order models, so there we actually do multiple approximations. So one is basically idealized flow approximation. In case of plug flow, we assume that there is in the radial direction it's fully mixed. There is only mixing happening in the axial direction. Or in case of NFR itself, we assume that the whole reactor is fully mixed. The reactor concentration is equal to that of the outlet concentration. And these are basically made with the main idea in mind that should make it mathematically simple in nature so that we can easily deal with it. Otherwise, if it is very much complex in nature, we can't find out the analytical solution to it. So these are basically one of the problem is that these are different or very much far away from that of the real life reactor behavior. Going to that of the analytical solution, which are basically kind of you can solve this differential equation analytically or numerically. So this analytical solution actually have limited utility because for a very simple system you will be finding the analytical solution. And then going to that of the empirical design and the scale up procedures. One of the thing is basically when you actually consider this 1D or 2D reactors, the simplified models itself. So when you are actually going to scale up this thing to that of the industrial level, so there are many empirical things which actually come into play, or there are certain constants which actually come into play, and we actually assume them in order to make our life easier. So one of the thing you are seeing here compared to that of the experiments in case of 1D or 2D models, they are basically mathematical in nature. They are not so much expensive or time uh, consuming. But one of the thing you are basically seeing is that we are making various approximations here. Okay. So which are basically different from that of the real life situation. But in case of CFD, which is computational fluid dynamics, so these are basically based on numerical solutions of basic conservation of mass, momentum, and heat transport. Okay. So we are solving the Navier-Stokes equation, the continuity equation, and also if we are considering this mass and the reaction itself, we are also solving the mass transfer and the reaction transport equation for these cases. But these CFD models they are expensive, they are time consuming, but they are much more accurate compared to that of the these first order, the second order models and the experiments itself. Okay, so if you are going with that of the experiment, so that will be expensive and time consuming, but it is also always not possible to have the experiments. So then these first order, the second order models, and the CFD models actually come into account. In case of experiments, assumptions are not there. If it's a very complex one, we have to make a few. And for the 1D or the second D models, what we do is basically we are solving it numerically or analytically. But another thing, we are basically making it much more easier for our own purpose to make it simple. And for the CFD based model, what we are doing is we are basically solving the basic momentum and the mass momentum and heat transport equation over all the cells, which are basically what we do is basically we take a domain and discretize this domain into small cells or stencils of cells, and which actually where we solve this momentum equation and the mass and the heat transfer equation, and then we get a solution out of it. So this is basically when the experiments are not possible, you can go with CFD and 1D or 2D models. But in case of CFD, the assumptions are much more less compared to that of the 1D or the 2D models. So the CFD is actually if we want to get a very detailed view of the reactor itself or how the reactor works, CFD is one of the things you should do. So do you have any doubt in this slide? Okay. So going to the historical perspective itself, so the Euler equation was basically to describe the conservation of momentum for the inviscid fluid. So the word inviscid means the viscosity itself is zero, which actually makes the viscous term to be zero in the Navier-Stokes equation. So initially that is basically called the Euler equation, which is basically Navier-Stokes equation for the inviscid fluid. Those were the people actually the scientists actually tried to solve them in the this scientist Euler. He started to solve this in the year 1707 to 1783. So in between his time span, he kind of tried to solve it. And then going to that of the viscous transport itself, the Naviers and the Stokes, these are the name of the two scientists who actually invented this Navier-Stokes equation, which actually forms the heart of that of the CFD simulations. And then we went to the Navier-Stokes equation, then turbulence came into play. Initially, people actually tried to deal with that of the laminar flow, but then turbulence came into play. So turbulence itself is very much difficult to predict. So then I will discuss how we deal with turbulence. And Reynolds average Navier-Stokes equation. This is actually one of the way of solving this turbulence, and which was invented by Osborne Reynolds. And this in the early 20th century itself, after the 18th and the 19th century, in the early 20th century, we went to turbulence, boundary layer flows, and prominent scientists like Prandtl, von Karman, Taylor, Kolmogorov, Batchelor, they actually played a vital role in the development of the theory itself, the theory of turbulence. So going to that of the early simulation, so Kawaguchi actually tried to calculate the flow around a cylinder in 1953 by using a mechanical desk calculator. So he was working for 20 hours per week for 18 months. And if you are using some CFD solvers or if you are familiar with it, you can do it within some 5-6 minutes. If your computer is fast enough. So which is basically the case for most of the PCs. So the development at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, this NL laboratory, these national laboratories which are present in USA actually played an important role in the development of the CFD codes. So particularly in cell method, marker and cell approach, these what is it stream function methods which are basically used for fast Navier-Stokes solvers and arbitrary Lagrange Eulerian method which is basically ALE method and K-epsilon turbulence model. There are other turbulence model also which were developed at that point of time in these in 1960s by various prominent scientists. And Imperial College, so one of the temple of CFD. So this discretization scheme, simple algorithm, parabolic flows, and Spalding, Patankar. Patankar actually invented this simple algorithm, and Professor Gossman during 1970s, and Spalding plays an important role in boundary layer theory. So different professors actually came to they played a vital role in the development of the CFD theories, and alongside doing these theories, they also developed different CFD codes. Since we have to solve this matrix, when we actually discretize this Navier-Stokes equation, we get a system of equation. So this system of equation we solve by using matrix, and this matrix you have to solve by using computers. And these basically CFD codes are required in order to find the solution to the system of equation. So then various commercial CFD codes actually came into play, like Fluent, CFX, PyDap, Polyflow, Phoenix, Star CCM, this Star CD, and Flow 3D, which is also present now. So these different commercial safety codes also came into play, and routinely they are used in aerospace, automobile industry, and they are also being applied nowadays to various branches of engineering. Since most of the things are composed of fluid and solid, so you actually apply these things and get the detailed representation of the flow field which are happening there. And then from there we can get a good perspective of how we should change the design so that we can optimize our audio. So, do you have any doubt? Okay. No. So, the growth of the high performance computing. So, going to that of the different high performance computers which are used here. So, nowadays we use this HPCs since our personal computers are not so much, uh, we can't do it on our personal computers. If the simulation is too much large, then we should use HPC. So HPC is basically multiple personal computers similar if I want to make you learn in a layman's term. So these are basically various nodes. So the whole thing is basically called a cluster, and these are various nodes. So nodes actually contain this number of GPUs and CPUs, so which we can access by using our terminal, and this we run our jobs here. So for example, in the first supercomputer, the which is in rank one nowadays, is Frontier in USA. So which is basically 1.102 exaflops per second, and this one is the CPU cores, so 606208 cores, and GPU cores is some 8335 and 360 cores. So as you can see it from here, these are basically very large number of cores. So here you can run multiple jobs and also multiple simulations and also very large simulations. For example, atmospheric simulations, which are very much the number of cells are very much high, and so the matrix also becomes large. And which requires a high computational process power in order to process it. So the power consumption itself is 22.7 megawatt power, which is similar to that of a small village, a small town. So as you can see it here, it is a large scale. So this is actually these are very much required when you go for atmospheric simulations or very detailed direct numerical simulation. The number of cores which are required are very high. So as of now, I am giving a very uh, a- an overview of the whole thing, but the terminology I am using that I am going to discuss in the consecutive lectures. So I don't think there is anything to be worried about. So computational fluid dynamics is a numerical solution of the basic flow equation. So what we do is basically we take a domain and divide the whole domain into multiple cells. Okay. So then what we do is basically we solve the continuity and the momentum equation, the equation motion and the continuity equation. By solving these two basic equations, if it's a non-reactive and a non-mass transfer, non-heat transfer flow, we can get the whole flow field by using this continuity and the momentum equation. The more physics get added into the system, the more equation you have to solve. So if it's a non-isothermal flow, you have to solve the heat equation along with the continuity and the momentum equation. So here I'm saying that numerical heat transfer. So if you want to have that heat transfer along with the flow itself, I will entertain your question. Let me finish this slide. So this numerical heat transfer, you have to solve the equation of energy. And for the mass transfer and the reaction itself, you have to solve the species transport alongside the mass and the momentum equation. So yes, you can ask question, please. So the domain itself, I have to go multiple slides. For example, this one is a CSTR. Okay. So this one is a impeller and this one is a quarter of a CSTR. So this one is a tank wall and this one is a baffle. So this is called the domain over which I am solving this Navier-Stokes equation and the equation of continuity. Okay. Yes, 3D space. So what we do is basically we have this 3D space. We divide the domain into small cells as you can see it here. So is it you can see in the screen that I've divided this domain into small rectangular cells. Okay. So these small rectangular cells I'm going to solve the this momentum equation and the continuity equation. So if it's a non-reactive, non-heat transfer flow. But if heat transfer comes into account, you have to solve the momentum equation and the continuity equation. Alongside that, you have to solve the heat transfer equation. So that's what I'm saying. So another question I got, I think you can ask. I have no issue. Please. Yes, Mokshil, am I audible? You raised your hand. That's why I'm asking. I think that's the mistake. You can interrupt me if you have any questions in future. Okay. So going to that of the need of the CFD itself. So previously, Mokshil, did you have any question? Hello, Mokshil. Okay, you don't have. So what is the need of CFD in chemical engineering? So going to that of the chemical reaction of the reactor engineering. So analysis and the designing of the reactors are basically based on this idealized flow situation. As I've said earlier, if you are going for 1D models, the simplified models, so we assume it to be a CSTR or that's a PFR or combination of both. Okay. So in the CSTR, we are basically assuming that the concentration inside the reactor is same as that of the outlet concentration. And in the PFR, we are saying that it's a continuous gradient is there along the length. So along the length itself, there is a gradient, but there is no radial mixing. So that's not the case when we are talking about non-ideal reactors, because in any part of the reactor, we can't say that whether it's perfectly mixed or that's only axial mixing is taking place, but no radial gradient is there. So we can't tell anything about it. Here we are doing some certain assumptions to make our life simple. So then, as I have said earlier, So there are deviations from the ideal performance also. If I take a simple CSTR reactor like this, and there is an inlet of the reactants, the inlet through which the reactants are coming inside, and the outlet through which product is going outside. And some things we have also sometimes we have seen is that there is a stagnant region, or which we call it to be a dead zone, where the velocity of the reactants or the product is zero. So this part is not interacting with the flow itself. It certainly got deposited, having no velocity at all. So these are basically deviations from the ideal performance. So what happens that your reactor volume actually gets slashed off because of that, because you are not using the whole effective volume. Okay. So that's actually one of the things you can change the reactor volume when you are solving the CSTR equation. And then if it's a plug flow reactor, we assume it to be a gradient along the axial direction only. There is no radial mixing. But if the flow is basically because of non-uniform velocity, turbulence is present there. These ADs are present there. So these are basically will not be captured by the simple this plug flow reactor equation. Okay. So multiple things actually creep up. So in case of MFR reactor, the channeling of fluid, recycling of fluid, formation of stagnant pockets, short circuiting, or bypassing of fluid, these things are not going to get captured. We can do it in case of 1D by using some mathematical consideration, but that is not the accurate one. So in PFR also some mixing in direction of flow or incomplete mixing in the direction normal to that of the flow that will not be captured. For example, if there is some turbulence happening, that will not be captured by the equation. So then what happens that your average conversation actually gets lower than these ideal reactors, which is MFR or PFR. Then what you have to do is basically, since your equation are not going to get it captured, so what you have to do is basically you have to go for certain other kinds of approaches. So going to that of the multiphase reactor ISO, so here you can see a bubble column. So here it's filled with a liquid and then we are putting gas inside, which causes these multiple bubbles to form, which have this meandering motion and goes to the top of the column. So these things will not be kind of, it's difficult or it's not possible to get it accurately represented by this MFR or PFR models. Or if I increase the gas, it becomes a slug flow region where the bubble diameter becomes more than 60% of that of the column diameter. Or in case of churn flow itself, it actually becomes distorted bubbles. Or in case of annular flow itself, it actually gas flows inside and the liquids are being pushed to the wall because of increase in that of the gas flow velocity. So this bubble is basically when the gas velocity is low, and if I increase the gas velocity, it actually goes to slug, then churn, then annular, and these are the different regimes we get. So these are not possible. You can't by using experiment. You can visually say by using optical techniques, but in case of 1D models, you are not going to get it. In case of CFD, you are going to get it. Okay. So 1D models is out of picture. So going to that of the gas solid flow region. So the initially I discussed about the gas liquid flow region, and then this one is a fluidized bed where the bed is filled with solid particles, and then gas is injected from the base of the bed, and then this gas comes in contact with the solid. They react or two gases react. This kind of thing happens. So if it's kind of a fixed bed, the solids are actually not moving. If it's a homogeneous fluidization, it actually certainly the velocity is higher than that of the minimum fluidization velocity. If it is a bubbling fluidization, this gas actually form these gas pockets similar to that of the bubble. These bubbles are similar to that of the one we see in case of bubble column itself here. So these gas pockets are basically different since we don't have a surface tension force which are acting here. But in case of gas liquid system, we have a surface tension force which are acting at the gas liquid interface. And if I increase the gas velocity, so similar to that of the gas liquid flow regimes, it actually forms a slugging pattern. And then if I increase the gas itself high, then it will throw the solid out of the bed and it actually becomes turbulent fluidization. And if I increase it more, it becomes pneumatic conveying. So these are the different regimes. So these are basically captured by using CFD or by experimental techniques, but it cannot be captured by using 1D or 2D models. So do you have any question until now? Okay. So my tempo is right? You are able to understand me and the speed is right, or it is not, you can say. Okay. So CFD is basically giving a detailed quantitative prediction of that of the heat, this fluid flow, heat and mass transfer, transport, and the chemical reactions. And it is fast, it is inexpensive. Uh, if it's a direct numerical simulation, then that will be expensive. But normal simulations, which are generally semi-resolved or unresolved in nature, those are basically inexpensive in nature, not so much expensive, like the experiment, and can provide useful information whether it is difficult to perform experiments. Sometime, for example, you are basically measuring something where the temperature is too much high, but the sensor actually doesn't allow it. The sensor will melt. So then you can use simulations in order to predict that what is the temperature there. So that can be done in a smart way. So those things can be done. And it also allows prediction of several quantities simultaneously. So in case of these experiments itself, it is certainly difficult to get all the flow fields simultaneously. Uh, but in case of simulation, it is easy to get. Much higher spatial and temporal resolution of the desired quantity. So you get a detail, you can put wherever you want to put a probe, and then you can find out what is the temperature, and you can find out the temperature profile at a specific point. But experimentally, that is not feasible always. And this is basically portable in nature. So you can sit in your table and then you can basically run your simulations and get the simulation data. So it doesn't replace the experiments completely. So the CFD models you are basically creating, or the validation you are creating, that should be, or the models you are creating, that should be validated by the experimental data. So the models is giving you a temperature or a velocity profile. So that should be validated by experiments. So the experiment should agree with your simulations. So you should have your experimental validation ready, and then you can use your simulations for various purposes. So your models, since we are using some models here, then it cannot replace the experiments completely. Though in case of fully resolved simulation, you don't require experiments. There, the simulations are basically equivalent to that of the experiment. Those are pretty much as advanced at this level, so I'm not going to discuss now. So numerical results are always approximate. So inadequate mathematical models of governing equations, approximation used in discretization of governing equations, solution errors, use of iterative methods. So if you are going for some kind of 1D or 2D model, the mathematical model will not be able to capture the whole thing. Okay. So as I've said earlier, this bubbling, slugging regime, this churn turbulent regime, these kind of things are not being captured by the 1D or the 2D model. And sometimes we use approximations here also. In case of CFD, we also discretize it, but that leads to kind of truncation error, which can be reduced if I reduce the spatial and the temporal resolution. And those things can also be reduced in case of 1D or 2D models. But CFD is much more reliable as you are resolving, or you are seeing that what is happening at each and every cell. So as I've shown it earlier, so the reliability of the CFD simulations is greater for that of the laminar or slow flow than the turbulent or fast flows, single phase flows and multi-phase flows, and passive then reactive flows. So these are basically laminar. We actually solve the Navier-Stokes equation and the continuity equation, and then turbulent or fast flows. So in case of turbulent flow or fast flows, we have to use this Bosonic approximation and the different kind of turbulence model. So the reliability decreases, then you have to validate it. So that kind of increases or challenging it becomes in terms of safety, but that can be done. That's not an issue. And single phase flow, it is easier, but in case of multi-phase flows also nowadays, it can be easily done. That's not an issue. But passivity is much more easier compared to that of the reactive flows itself. So those things nowadays it's actually evolving with time. So once you can accurately capture the hydrodynamics of the system, you will be able to capture the reaction, the heat, and the mass transfer pretty much accurately. So those are the things which are people nowadays are kind of overcome. So do you have any question until now? Anyone in the class? Uh, Hello, Sachin. Yeah. No, no, anyone can have it. Others can have it. Sachin, do you have any question? You can ask any question. This is a first class itself. I think you should be free to ask the questions. Otherwise, what happens that of if you are not able to catch up today, then these have a cascading effect on the classes which I'm going to uh, take this time onwards. So I think if I'm going to entertain any question which is related to the topic, so you can ask it. I have no issue with it. Okay. So going to that are the components of CFD. So as asked by one of the students, so there are three things which are present there. So one is pre-processor, another one is solver, another one is post-processor. Okay. So pre-processor is basically we get a solution domain and then which we call it to be the geometry of the domain itself. Then we create a grid or the mesh generation. Okay. So if I get a domain like this, which is one quarter of a CS tier, so as you can see here, this is my geometry. So there's an impeller in the middle, we have a baffle, we have a tank wall. So this whole thing is a geometry. So then what we want to do is basically we will divide the whole domain into stencils of cells. So if I go here, if I zoom it, so you can see the cells here, these hexagonal cells. Okay, these hexagonal cells which are present in the row. So these cells solve we are going to solve the Navier-Stokes and the continuity equation in each of these cells to get a better representation of the sorry uh, to get a better representation of the flow itself. And then what we are doing is basically we are going to define the boundary conditions. Since any differential equation, any kind of thing equation we are going to solve, we have to solve a boundary condition for that. So what is happening at the bound? So by boundary, I mean that what is happening at the wall, tank wall itself, the baffle wall, the wall of the shaft, the impeller. These things you have to know. So generally what we follow is that no slip boundary condition. So the velocity of the fluid is zero at the wall. Okay. So these are the boundary conditions I'm talking about here. And then different zones are there, definition of fluid phase and property. So typically here is only one zone because the whole thing is filled with fluid. So you can divide the domain into different zones depending upon the complexity of the problem itself. So then what we do is basically we use a solver. So solver actually can use different method like finite difference, finite volume, finite element. So one of the popular solvers we use is ANSYS Fluent, so which is basically a finite volume method based solver. So there's a slight difference between the three, so which I will discuss in the maybe in the next or the class after that. And then what we do is basically we discretize a governing equation. And discretizing after discretizing it, what we do is basically uh, we actually form a system of algebraic equation. After discretizing this partial differential equation, we actually get a system of algebraic equation. And after getting the algebraic equation, the system of algebraic equation is converted into a matrix format, which is Ax equal to B format, where you have to find out the X. So B is a source matrix and A is a coefficient matrix. So which I'm going to discuss in the later class. Uh, it is okay if you are unable to get it now. And then the solution of the equations and the accuracy and convergence are the things we are going to solve. Since we actually solve these matrix equations in an iterative manner, so therefore we have to look into the accuracy and the convergence of it. Okay. So then going to the post processor itself, the display of geometric grid. So in the post processing parts itself, so you will see this velocity profiles. Since you have solved the continuity and the momentum equation in each of these cells, you will see the velocity profile here. So physically, as you can see it from here, is that if the impeller moves, it actually moves this fluid radially and it forms a vortex like this in the lower part of the domain and in the upper part of the domain. Okay, so these are this how you can see the velocity profile. So if I put a baffle here, it actually gets modified. So those things you can also see. So this is basically the post-processing part where we see the contours we see how the pressure and the velocity profiles are changing over the whole domain. And then going to the region of interest is vector plots, contour plots, isosurface. So isosurface is basically, for example, if you want to create a surface with a velocity v1. So that surface is called the isosurface. You can create a video of your impeller mixing. So the impeller itself is rotating and then kind of you see the video that how the mixing is taking place. And you can also put some probes and see how the velocity profile is changing at a single point itself. You can calculate different variables by using different user-defined functions, which I'm going to, which I will show you in one of the classes. I will show you how it works. And these are the three components of that of a CFD project or the CFD of a problem you are going to solve. So this is basically the layman's overview. The detail part we will discuss later on, but this how it works. So do you have any question up till now? Okay. And then going to that of the typical CFD project. So numerical simulations of single phase flow in a starred vessel. So this is actually one of the sample problems I want to show you that how a typical CFD project goes on. So you have a tank, you actually fill that tank with a fluid up to a tank height h, and these are basically the baffles. In the middle you have an impeller. It is actually rotating and mixing the fluid. Okay. So how to see that how the velocity profile changes over the whole domain. So what you have to do is basically you have to develop a grid disk impeller and optimize your performance by using CFD. So they want to say that for different impeller this arrangement itself, how the mixing time changes. So for example, you have a certain concentration C here. Okay. So for example, I want to have a fluid which is basically having a certain concentration C1 here, but the concentration it is not being dispersed in the other part of the tank. So what I'm doing is basically I'm mixing it. So after a certain time, the whole tank actually reaches the equilibrium concentration. So then I can say that it's perfectly mixed. So similarly, you can infer in case of a tank which is filled with a temperature T1. For example, the temperature is lower at the bottom of the tank and is higher at the upper part of the tank itself. So what you want to do is basically mix it and make it a uniform temperature. So they want to say that how the impeller geometry actually changes this dynamics. So going to the domain itself. So as you can see it from here, this one is a impeller, this one is a shaft, and this one is a impeller, and this one is a baffle itself, and this is the tank wall. And the solution domain is basically this one. So basically what we do is basically we made a simplified version of it and then we meshed it. And this part is basically the wall where the boundary conditions are basically implemented, the wall of the tank, the wall of the shaft and the wall of the impeller and the wall of the baffle. These are the places where basically we are implementing the boundary condition. And then what we are doing is basically we are kind of after meshing it, we you can see that the meshing at the side of the impeller itself. So here the meshing is a different one, which is a tetrahedral mesh. So in this part itself, where the impeller is not present, you can go with a hex mesh. But when the geometry changes, you have to go for tet mesh. So this thing I will discuss about in the later stages. And there are different grids you have to see. So one of the things you have to do when we start with the CFD project is that you have to do a grid independent study. So there are four grids which is taken, which is coarse, medium, fine, and very fine. So here you can see the cell count. So basically, if I make it to be, if I see that my fine grid is basically giving me more or less the same result as that of the very fine grid, I will not go to the results of the very fine one. I will stick with the fine one. So one of the reason is that the number of cells is less. So if the number of cells is less, the matrix size decreases. and which actually makes the whole computation to be a uh, less expensive. So it is not necessary that we go with very fine grids. So if my fine grid is giving me a result similar to that of the very fine grid, within the tolerable limit of error, so within that error tolerance itself, so then we can say that we can go with the fine. So which is basically from the computational aspect of it. And here you can see the details of the computational grid. So this is basically teeth mesh, which is similar to that of the tetrahedra that you studied in the coordinate geometry. And these are basically hex cells, which are basically keywords or uh, rectangular parallel pi. So these are the cells, different cells which are present here depending upon the complexity of the geometry. Okay. So the qualitative assessment of the flow behavior, as you can see it from here, the flow behavior is basically there is an impeller in the middle and there are baffles at the side of the tank. So as you can see that if I increase the velocity, the flow velocity itself, if I rotate the impeller, first it actually goes from here and then it hits the baffle and the flow actually goes up and down. So with the presence of the baffle itself, you can see that how the mixing pattern changes. And here you can see the velocity profile of the liquid which is near the impeller. So this is basically composed of that of the post-processing. So these are basically the qualitative assessment we are taking place. We are basically doing, but in the quantitative assessment, we will be talking about the mixing time and how the power requirement changes with that of the impeller shape itself. Those are the things we are going to discuss. So do you have any doubt until now? Anyone? Okay. So going to that of the effect of the grid resolution itself. So when we want to find out the effect of the grid resolution, so what we do is basically this axial velocity by t velocity. So axial means this velocity and the t velocity is the velocity at uh, the radial part of that of the impeller. So this axial velocity and the t velocity, as you can see it here, the different how it changes with that of the cell resolutions here we are seeing. And similarly in radial velocity by that of the t velocity of the impeller. So radial is in this direction and t velocity is a velocity at the tip of the impeller. And so you can see it from here that the course grid is not giving you a very good uh, prediction, but in case of buying and verifying, the difference itself is very low. And that's why I said that it's not always essential that we go with a very fine grid. So if I get a sweet spot where the fine grid is giving me more or less the same result as that of the very fine one at a lower computational cost, I will stick to it. So similarly, tangential velocity by t velocity, which is basically tangent to that of the impeller surface by t velocity. So these dots are basically the measurements, and these uh, solid lines are the coarse, and these dotted lines, one is medium, another one is dot dash is fine, and these multiple dot lines are basically these very fine. So from the legend itself, you can find that for what kind of mesh we are basically plotting the velocity profile. And this turbulent kinetic energy by t velocity. So here you can see there's a huge deviation between the experimental and the simulation one. So, but in case we are getting a good grid independence, but we are seeing that there is a difference between the two. So, as I said earlier, that if I actually say that simulations is giving me always giving me right result, that's not the case. So, what you have to do is basically while doing this CFD simulations, you have to validate that thing with that of the experimental data. So, if you are not able to validate it, then for example, in this case, this actual t by t velocity, actual velocity by t velocity, it is giving you a good result. This radial velocity and tangential velocity are so-so, not so good. But in case of turbulent kinetic energy, we are seeing a good disagreement. So what you have to do is basically you have to change the turbulence model and see why this turbulent kinetic energy is basically not giving you a good result. So these are the things you should look into. So simulations are that doesn't mean that if you are doing simulation that is going to be right. So what you have to do is basically you have to validate that with the experiments by using different models which are being used in CFD simulations. and then you have to see for what models you are going to get a good agreement. And then what you have to do is basically you can use a simulation for various designs. Uh, and then going to that of the dual impeller case. So what we do is basically instead of one impeller, we can go for two impellers, one above the another one. So then we have to see that how it changes. Uh, okay, Sachin. Yep. Uh, can you speak louder? So grid independent study, for example, for example, if very much I'm interested about this radial velocity, axial velocity, tangential velocity itself. So I will be doing the grid independent study for the three. I don't require it for turbulent kinetic energy. The variables that we are going to study, we have to do grid independent study for that variables. Okay. So the variables you are reporting in your paper or in your project itself, that should be grid independent. So sometimes what happens is that the velocity and the pressure we are interested about, which are called the first order variables. Maybe we are not interested about the fluctuating kinetic energy or the fluctuating velocity, which are second order variables. So what I'm saying is that it will give you a good agreement in case of first order variables, but if you consider that, or if I actually uh, see it for second order variables, it is not giving me a good agreement. So we have to go further and see why it is not good. So why we are not getting a good agreement. So we have to change the models. Okay. So any questions by anyone? Okay. So then what you have to do is basically you have to so this dual impeller case itself. So as you can see it from here, there are two impellers which are present there. One at the top, another one is the bottom. So instead of one impeller, if I take Sachin, do you have any question? You can put your hands down. I thought you had a question. Okay, no issue. So this dual impeller case itself. So as you can see it here, the hydrodynamics is bit different from that of a single impeller case, a single. So these first order models will not be able to capture it, but CFD is able to capture it. So we want to see that how it changes. So as I've said earlier, what is called the mixing time. So the mixing time is basically the time at which the concentration of the temperature over all the points in the system actually reaches an equilibrium value. For example, if you are actually putting salt in water and kind of mixing it, then after some time you will see that this salt actually gets dissolved in that of water if it is present in very small concentration, or sugar in water. So you actually get a instead of getting a precipitating sugar at the bottom of the this glass itself, we actually have a mixed sugar over the whole water solution itself. It becomes a solution. So typically that's called an equilibrium because the concentration at every point in the liquid actually the concentration of sugar that becomes same. So that is basically called the equilibrium concentration. So the time which is required by the this mixing pattern itself to reach that equilibrium concentration is called the mixing time. Okay, that can be in terms of concentration, that can be in terms of temperature. So it depends upon it. So what are the variables you want to get an equilibrium the equilibrium value of? So this one is a y-axis is a mixing time and the x-axis is a power consumed. So the mixing time actually, as you can see, the mixing time decreases with increase in power. So more rigorous I actually move this impeller, more RP, then what happens that it actually gets mixed with. So that physics is being reflected here. So these are the things. So what they're doing is basically they're taking the diameter and P is basically the pitch, the distance between the two impellers. So they are changing the diameter and the pitch and seeing that how it changes with that, how the mixing time changes with the power consumed. Okay. So those are the things. A solid line is basically giving you D equal to 100 mm and P equals to 5.25. This dotted line is basically giving you D equals to 100 mm and P equal to 10 mm. And this gray solid line, is basically giving you D equals to 150 mm and P equals to 10.5 mm. And this D equal to 100 mm and P equal to 10 mm, this gray dot dash line, that line basically gives you this one, this configuration. Okay. So these are the things we should be, I think, these are the things which are we are studying here. So we are seeing that how the mixing time changes with that of the power consumed. So you can see that for a constant power itself, if I draw a vertical line from here, you can see from a constant power which one is giving you the minimum mixing time. So then you will choose that for a mixing purpose. So that's how we optimize it. So initially I said that our main goal is to optimize or increase the efficiency of the reactor. So from the hydrodynamical aspect of it, we are basically increasing the velocity to make it more mixed. So now if I put reactants inside it, it will be more, they will come in contact with each other. So which will produce products with a higher conversion rate. And this will actually make the reactor to be a more efficient one. So that's actually this is one of the conventional approaches we follow here. So first we predict the hydrodynamics, then we tune it up in such a manner so that it actually increases the mixing of the contact between the reactants, which results in a higher conversion and which actually make it much more economically beneficial for us. Okay, so that's how we can basically see the mixing performance of a reactor by using CFD. So do you have any question until now? Any of any of you, do you have any question? Okay, so going to the chemical process industry. So this you can fairly have seen in your BTech that this is basically what we call the shell and tube exchanger, where certain fluid flows to the shell and other fluid comes to the tube, and then they kind of exchange the heat between the two. So we basically used to use the LMTT approach in order to find out the the heat transfer between the two fluids, but that's not the case. While there is a non-uniform flow inside the system, then what we have to do is basically we have to solve this heat transfer along with the momentum and the continuity equation in order to get the whole velocity and the temperature profile inside the system. So these are conventional tray columns inside, which are basically you can see it from here. So these are tray columns found in mass transfer equipment where the flow distribution is basically happening from pore till mouth inlet. So these are basically these kind of things are present in the industry. So mass transfer and heat transfer equation equipment, these are the places where we use this computational fluid dynamics to get a good picture of what is happening there. And from there we can tune out the system to get a much favorable situation, which is beneficial from the conversion rate which is happening or from the amount of product which is we are getting. So going to the reactor itself, so as you can see, this one is a bubble column reactor. So what we are doing is basically we are injecting gas from the bottom of this the column which is filled with liquid. So what happens is basically it forms a meandering kind of a plume itself. So as you can see it from here. So these are basically gas liquid flow in a bubble column reactor, and this one is basically start tank reactor. And I don't have a picture for the fluidized bed, but I've shown you before how a fluidized bed, feeds bed, and the trickle bed reactor basically look like. So this one is an internet case that I've discussed recently. So for different processes, we can basically find out that what is a hydrodynamic. So we can predict it by using simulation. So as you can see it from here, the experiment and the simulation itself have a good agreement. Okay, so this one is typically Euler-Lagrangian approach. So we are going to discuss it later on. As of now, we are not discussing it. So do you have any questions in this slide? Hello, am I audible? Okay. So then going to that of the bubble column reactor itself. So when you actually inject gas at the bottom of that of the bubble column, it actually forms this multiple bubbles or a stream of bubbles at the base in the column inside. So these are basically reactors. So bubble column reactor, star tank reactor, fluidized bed reactor, feeds bed, and trickle bed reactor. So you can easily Google them and then you can find out that how the reactor looks like and what are the phases which are involved in that of the reactions. And Then what we do is basically this how the experiments looks like. So this one is a cylindrical column. So what we do is basically we do a meshing of the whole domain, and then what we do is basically we put gas inside, and this gas actually forms these meandering structures. And as you can see that these are basically the streamlines which are present here, and this one is a gas velocity profile. So as you can see it from here, that this gas velocity profile is predicted by that of the simulation, so you can tally it that of the experiment. So in the experiment itself, you can do a particle image velocimeter, and then you can find out the velocity from there, and from there you can basically tally it with that of the simulation. Okay. So going to that of the reactors itself. So this one is a fluidized bed reactor. So what we do is basically we uh, fill the bed with gas, and then we fill the bed with solids, and then we inject the gas from the bottom, which actually form these bubbles. Okay, as you can see from here, these white patches here. So these are basically called fluidized bed reactors, and there are fixed beds also, but the solids actually they're in contact with each other. They don't move. The gas actually flows, and they kind of react with that of the solid, or two gases react to form where the solid act as a catalyst. So these are basically called the fixed bed reactors. So multiple reactors are typically present in the industry, which you can basically kind of resolve the flow field by using CFD. So as you can see from here, this is a machine on the surface of the spherical catalyst which is present here. Okay. So now here you can see the velocity profile on the surface of the sphere. So going to that of the catalytic reactor itself. So here these are basically the different catalytic structure which are present here. So this one is being a cylinder, and these are basically trilobes, and these different kind of structures are present here. So what you can do is basically you can see that how the reactor efficiency changes with that of using these catalytic beds, because this catalytic bed is what they are going to do is that they are going to change the contact between that of the gas and the solid, and gas, and which basically influences your reaction. So as you have said, seen earlier that in mass transfer operation or mass transfer, you have read that we actually use this kind of rusty ring kind of things in order to this cross kind of catalyst in order to have a much more specific surface area. So these things you can quantify by using CFD. Okay, so these are the different catalytic reactors which are present here, and the catalytic reactor filled with different kind of catalyst. So this one is a pressure distribution. So and this one is a velocity distribution. So from here you can basically see that how it changes in the along the axial direction, and also the radial one. Going to that of the fluid mixing time prediction, gas dispersion, impeller design, inline mixture, laminar mixture, static mixtures, free mixtures, solid suspension. So different kind of how the mixing changes with that using different kind of impeller or this kind of screen mixers. How it actually how the mixing with the two fluids or the fluid and the gas is basically happening here. So these kind of things can be pretty much easily studied in case of by using CNT. So this one is another example where the gas is dispersed in a starred vessel which is filled with a liquid, and it actually comes in contact, the gas actually comes in contact with the impeller. Then this impeller actually breaks this gas into multiple bubbles, which increases the surface area, and which increases the contact between the gas and the liquid phase, and then the heat and the mass transfer itself, and which basically kind of enhances your reaction. And these things you can easily predict by using SIP. So do you have any question until now? Okay. So going to that of the application of different process industry. So this one is basically a gasification process. So you can basically find out that how the velocity profile looks like inside a cold gasification process. So there are different kind of chemical loop combustion reactors, different kind of reactors which are present there, where you can basically find out that how the reaction happens by using CFD. So there are other applications also, like the aerospace or the defense application, where the aircraft, missile, spacecraft. So this one is basically a torpedo. So it's kind of a missile which is being launched from the submarine. So you can see that how the flow profile changes around the missile. So, and we can also find out the pressure field which is induced by the interaction of the rotor with that of the helicopter itself. So this is actually one of the things. And you can also find out this UAV, which is basically an unmanned aerial vehicle. So you can find out how the flow field changes with that of the change in the shape of the these flying things, and therefore you can basically design it. Sometimes what we do is basically we, in case of this torpedo, we actually covered this torpedo with hydrophobic surfaces in order to make it what should I say, lower the drag on the surface of this torpedo. So those are the things I think uh, we can do, and therefore make it much more efficient, much more faster for a required amount of thrust or input power into it. Okay, so going to that of the automotive industry, and therefore we can basically go with aerodynamics, climate and comfort control, engine flow, combustion, flow induced noise, fuel systems. So these are the different applications which are present here. So as you have seen in the Formula One car, we see that how the air flows over the whole system. In case of a normal car itself, we see that how much aerodynamic we can make. We also see that how the HVAC system is basically operating inside the that car itself, or how the HVAC system, how it is cooling, or how the air is flowing over the surface of the car, whether we should make it more aerodynamic or fuel efficient in nature. Because if I actually make it much more aerodynamic in nature, the drag force reduces. So if the drag force reduces, the fuel consumption will reduce, and therefore will make the car to be a more efficient. So do you have any questions until now? Think urban soaring. Okay, please. Okay. It depends upon the flow problem. For example, if a reaction is happening for a single bubble which is rising in a liquid, it will not take much of a time. But if it's like the reaction which is happening in a catalytic flow reactors, these reactions are typically expensive in nature because, as you can see it from here, the mesh are basically tit mesh. So they are basically not hex mesh. So the problem is that depending upon the meshing of the system, rather than these equations, the meshing actually plays an important role because this meshing actually interferes with your convergence. So more time is required in order to converge a solution, the more time it will take. But compared to that of the flow problem, the reaction problem will take you some maybe some two times or three times. But that is problem specific in nature. If it's a hex grid, it will not take much of a time. And but if it's like this kind of grid itself where there is thick mesh, which is unstructured in nature, you will face problem. There are multiple things you have to do in order to get rid of this. So what they do is basically sometimes they increase the size and then they kind of join this two catalyst particle with a certain bridge itself. Otherwise, they shrink it. Otherwise, what happens? It actually gives rise to cells with high skewness, which actually are prone to divergence. So those things can happen, but it basically depends upon the mesh itself. So, but it will take, I think, some two to three times it will take. If it's a flow field, then you convert the velocity and the pressure equations. But if it's a reactive, you have to converse that reactive alongside your the velocity and the pressure equation. So it will take much more time, but that depends upon the mesh and the complexity of the problem itself. Am I clear, or did I confuse you? So, do others have question? Huh? Uh, Please have questions. Arpan, please. So regarding the assignments, I will show you how to code. So basically, I'm planning to use MATLAB. Uh, so if you're not good at coding, you should start working on simple problems. For example, I hope you actually came across numerical methods in your bachelor degree. So that bachelor degree numerical methods you can solve by using, for example, secant method, Newton-Raphson method, those you can, or RK method you can basically solve by using MATLAB. So that will give you a fairly good idea or how to solve a system of equation which is in matrix format by using MATLAB. So those things are pretty much easy. I don't think that will be difficult. But if you want to create a full-fledged CFD code that requires a huge amount of time in order to code, that things we are not going in our current course. So that will take you around some 5 6 days in order to develop a single CFD code. So those things we are not doing. But simple problems, for example, heat flow in a uh, straight bar itself, those things, or in a on a plate or heat flow in a plate. So those things we are going to do, and I don't think that will be difficult for you. And if you are poor, then I will refer you a book in MATLAB coding, so that will be helpful for you. And regarding the numerical techniques itself, so you can go through the. As of now, I think linear algebra will do your work in this course. And but later on, you will require this Fourier transform and also the Laplace transform. Those kind of things actually come into play. Spectral method. Those are the things I think you should. But as of now, linear algebra will do your work. I don't think I will go beyond that. So I think we have some doubts in written format. Okay. So do you have any questions? Others have questions regarding the course and the things. Please have. Hello, am I audible? Sachin, Mohammed, Mokshil, Utkarsha, please ask questions. Anirudh, Anirudh, please ask questions. So, no, spectral method is not covered in this. I'm not going for it. I may give you a test of it, but I don't think we are going to cover it. Majorly, we are going to stick with the simple algorithm and the initial MATLAB coding regarding the flow in a bar or flow in a no the flow and the heat transfer on a plate. This kind of things we are going to solve by using different kind of scenes like quick scheme uh, and then upwind scheme, central difference. Those things we are going to see, and we are going to talk about this transportiveness, conservativeness, these kind of things we are going to see. And how this actually, you said that how much time it will take. So sometimes what happens that if you don't choose a correct scheme alongside with that of the mesh itself, it will give you unphysical results. So how this unphysicality we can, because if you're using a software, you are pretty much, if you don't understand the concepts itself, you are pretty much unaware that how the solution itself is accurate or not. So what you have to do is basically you have to see the mass conservation, the momentum conservation, and multiple things inside it in order to get a good picture of it. And also how whether the velocity itself or the pressure itself is unphysical in nature or not. So those things you should, I think, those are the things I will concentrate upon. But later on, I think in one or two classes we can go with spectral or something like that. It depends. If some people are interested, we can. So, do you have any questions? Lushikesh, Sachin, Mohammed, Mokshil. Okay, so going to that of this flow modeling for the HVAC system, this heating, ventilation, and cooling system. So typically, in case of an amphitheater or the pressure and the force distribution in an airport or velocity profile in a stadium, so you can basically find it by using CFD. Although the cell size will be much more compared to that of a small domain you are going to simulate, but yes, we can do. And typically, we need high performance computing for that. And basically, you can see the buoyancy driven flow. You can also simulate fire, smoke by using CFD, natural ventilation, pollution dispersion model. So, how the pollutants are getting dispersed from a primary source itself and how it changes over the whole domain. So, for example, if you want to see the pollution concentration, there is a chimney in the city and you want to see that its distance apart, how it actually uh, the concentration changes in a spatial and a temporal basis, you can do it. And then your cell size becomes 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer or zero point 0.5 kilometer by zero point 0.5 kilometer instead of some 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter scale when you are actually analyzing a very small size. So it depends. The scale changes when you go for a bigger problem, but yes, we can resolve it by enough computation power and also by numerical. And then going to that of the mixture, vacuum machines, washing machine, kitchen appliances, oven, and refrigerator. So typically in an oven, you can see that how your food is getting cooked. And one of the things you can see by it is basically there's a heat and the reaction transport problem. Okay, so heat transfer is there. Along with that, there is reaction which is happening. So that you can see how it is happening in an oven or the physics of sloshing water in a washing machine. So typically, if the washing machine moves, this interface actually gets changed. So what we do is basically we track this interface by using volume of fluid method. Or you can also go for oil or oil method. So it basically depends what your aim is, and we can also see that how the dust is getting sucked inside these vacuum cleaners. So you're sucking the dust out of somewhere, how it getting out, how the recirculation is taking place, how much vacuum pressure is created. So those things you can basically how the pressure gradient is changing with that of the supplied power for a fixed configuration. So this kind of things you can see by using CFD, computational fluid dynamics. And then going to that of the heat sinks, thermal management, cooling fans, noise reduction, etc. So heat sinks are there. So typically these are basically placed near your processing unit or GPUs. So what they do is basically they suck the heat and throw it out of that of your computer. So those things are very much important to design. Otherwise, what happens that you actually uh, have a chance of local thermal heating, and which results in a local temperature spike, which causes the computer to slow down. And here we are seeing the temperature distribution and the cooling airflow in an electronics enclosure, so that it doesn't the temperature increases and the machine slows down. So those things are we are going to see by using safety. So one of the aspect of it is basically we are kind of seeing is that whether the before designing anything physical in nature, we are doing some kind of experiment. We are validating the safety model, and then we are cutting off the experimental cost by doing multiple CFD simulations. And we are going to see that how it changes for different configurations. So those are the things we are basically doing. And this velocity vector show the interaction of the airflow with equipment and the personnel in a clean room. So basically how it in a clean room the person is working with some electronics or some um, nanotechnology or something like that, but a clean room is basically required so that there is no dust interference, and seeing how the velocity profile or the velocity from that of the cooling unit, the HVAC unit is interacting with that of the thing he is working on. So those are the things I think very much important in electronics industry, and I think and CFD is used here in order to get a good picture of how the flow field is going to affect the network. Okay, so going to that of the food and the beverages. So food refrigeration, dyes and extrusion, pouring and filling, pack and drying, coating, mixing, blending. So typically, as you can see from here, this thermal characteristics of a cooling tunnel. So these are the chocolate bars you are actually producing. And then what you're doing is basically you can see the heat transfer from molten chocolate. So this chocolate is basically a solid. So it can part of it may be converted into a liquid that can re-solidify depending upon the temperature. It can also a part of it may get evaporated. So the heat transfer from the molten chocolate that is actually being you can see by using CFD, which considers a heat transfer and a phase change, but not a reaction. I'm considering that there is no reaction between a hot chocolate, and the air outside it. And then what we are doing is basically we are kind of cooling it by using coolant. So we are saying that whether we are cooling it too much or we are doing the necessary cooling which is required for the chocolate so that it doesn't mess up with the taste of the chocolate. So these things are pretty much important when you are actually very much concerned with the quality of the product and the taste of the product you are going to manufacture. So and this one is basically the flow path lines in a refrigerator. So how the flow lines is basically changing alongside the refrigerator. So foods are kept here, then the cool air actually comes inside and they are kind of cools the whole thing inside a refrigerator. And how it changes with that of the spatial location, it's an important thing. Otherwise, you don't know whether your refrigerator is kind of efficient or not. If it's cooling certain regions very much and then it's not recirculating inside the whole system, then the cooling is not done efficiently or the cooling is not done uniformly. I think that's actually one of the things which is very much important in case of manufacturing a good refrigerator, and therefore safety is required in that case. Going to that of the BOF steelmaking vessels, lawns, flows, cement and lime kilns, aluminum extrusion, cyclones, hydrocyclones, liquid metals or mold flows. So as you can see here, in case of steel making, what we do is basically we put the P guard on here and then we put the oxygen lawns in here, and the impurities are being oxidized and they float as slag. They are basically the impurities are converted into slag, which actually floats on the surface of the this oxidized this iron itself, and then basically we can separate the slag from that of the main iron, this oxidized iron, and this is basically used for that purpose. This basic oxygen furnace and rotary cement kilns are there, but the cement is getting mixed. These things are also the cyclone separator. So you can basically see that how the particles are getting separated in a cyclone separator that can be done by using CFD. So it's a huge application in the mineral processing also. So whether you should go for top blowing or bottom blowing or both. So bottom blowing is basically you're injecting the oxygen from the this bottom part itself, but top blowing is basically you are injecting the oxygen from the bottom and the top. So how it is basically influencing the hydrodynamics in a molten iron is very much important. But one of the thing is basically it is difficult to do experiment for this case. And in our lab, what we do is basically we go for a cold flow model. So cold flow model is basically uh, the what should I say? It is we are replacing this molten iron with that of a water, since water and the molten iron has the same viscosity. And then we are seeing that how the hydrodynamics is changing for different flow rate inside that reactor itself. So that's actually one of the things we are concentrating as of now. So those are the ways by which you can simplify your experimental problem. It is if it is difficult to give it to do experiment on high temperature systems. These are the things which are basically I think is important, and therefore going to that of the polymer processing also. We basically do the blow molding, coating, compression molding, extrusion, die, design, fiber spinning, polymerization, twin single or twin screw extrusion. These are the things which are basically important. These are the things we can basically uh, simulate by using CFD. So this extrusion, die design, and how compression molding is done, blow molding is done. So basically, you kind of have a polymer thing, and then you blow and create a thing like bottle. So how it is happening, how the surface of the bottle is being created. So those are the things I think they can be yes, they can be done by using CFD. So where they are used, there we are. we are simulating both the solid and the gases. So that's actually very much important. And going to that of the power generation itself, so boiler, burner, coal handling, combustors, fuel cell, windmills, nuclear power. So these are the things which are uh, very much important in nature for the flow and the temperature distribution in a burner. So therefore, what you have to do is basically this burner is basically where the gas actually the natural gas come, they burn, they reach the ignition point, they burn, and therefore this flame is actually produced where this natural gas is converted into that of carbon dioxide, and this kind of burning, how the combustion is taking place, whether it's complete or incomplete. So those are the things which are basically important in nature. So those things we can basically predict by using CFD, and the velocity field which is generated by using a wind turbine. We can see, we can find out its efficiency or the velocity field near a proposed wind farm site. So how the velocity field is changing near the mountain. So therefore we can put a wind turbine there and then we can get some energy out of the wind farm. So those things can be designed by using C. So do you have any question until now? Hello, am I audible? Okay, do you have any question? Other people, do you have any question? Arpan, Anirudh, Karsha, Mokshil, Sachin, Rushikesh, Mohammed, regarding software, anything? Okay, okay. So going to that on the compressor, fan, blowers, pumps, and turbines. So therefore, for multi-stage turbine, you can basically uh, you can use CFD and see how the velocity and the pressure profiles are changing on the surface. Centrifugal water pump you can design by using this CFD itself, and therefore this the water can go inside and that will come out by using a pump, and you can see that how the water is impacting the impeller. So whether a robust design is required, so how it changes with that of the impeller design. So those things you can basically see by using CFD. And the axial fans and the noise generated by a fan. So you can also see that how the noise is propagated by a fan also by using different acoustic equations alongside this flow velocity, the mass and the continuity equation. And this Mach number contour plots over the this turbine hub and blades. So from there you can basically find out that what is the velocity on the turbine hub and blades. So that can be also done by using CFD. So you have to see that whether some shock waves are created or some discontinuities are created which are going to hurt the turbine. So those things you can basically see by using CFD, and which is going to increase the uh, lifespan of the turbine you are using, because as we know that if we actually use a poor material which is not sustainable at that impact velocity, then what may happen is that it may break down, and so fracture may happen, so it may propagate with time, and which will basically reduce the lifetime of the equipment and which may reduce in sudden failure. So those things are pretty much important. So in case of aeroplanes also it's very much important. Otherwise that can cause a catastrophic failure, uh, and then accident. These kind of things should be avoided, and that can be avoided by using CFD. By using CFD you can basically find out the lifetime or the span of any instrument by using CFD also, by using different kind of analysis, failure analysis. And we can also use in case of biomedical force. So this is basically cerebral artery. So these ball-shaped structures, which are, as you can see it here, these are basically called the aneurysm. So aneurysm is basically those capillary walls where the walls of the regions where the walls of the artery actually gets weakened. If the walls get weakened, it actually get deformed. It actually forms a bulge when the blood is flowing through. So these weak wall regions are very much they are very much dangerous, because if they rupture, then what will happen that it can result in brain hemorrhage. So those things can also be predicted by using CFD. So if I get a scan of the MRI scan itself, and then you can find out that how your the brain structures the structure itself is if there is any aneurysm in your brain itself. Therefore, we can find out that do a COT simulations, and then we can also see that how to get rid of it, or at what uh, kind of what should I say, like what kind of velocity it will rupture, or what kind of pressure. So those kind of medical analysis can be done. So you can give medicine to the patient in order to get rid of these impulses, and then we can cure the situation. Okay. So these are very much dangerous, since it actually causes internal hemorrhages. And this is basically the simulated time evolution of blood flow through the artery with five aneurysm. So for different aneurysm, it is basically showing that how the blood flows at different instant of time is basically changing. So for biomedical application, even the beating of the heart or the working of the lungs can be also be simulated by using CFT. So typically we use immerse boundary for that, which as of now I don't think I will be discussing here. So multiple methods are there. So in these CFT cases also, multiple methods are there in order to simulate a flow condition, like volume of fluid method, Euler-Euler method, Euler-Lagrange method, immerse boundary method, direct numerical simulations are there, fluid structure interaction problems are there. So multiple subgroups are there, and there are multiple schemes which are used here in order to get rid of numerical stability in each of these subgroups. So depending upon the problem itself, you will get, it's not something like if you are able to solve one problem, you will be able to solve another problem. So there are multiple layers of difficulty which are present in order to deal with different uh, multiple difficulties are there, and you should have different skills in order to get rid of these difficulties. So as you can see it from here, this is basically the modeling of blood flow and pressure in arteries. So this one is the domain. So this is becomes a this fluid structure interaction problem, because fluid is, these arteries are basically elastic in nature, flexible in nature. So therefore, the fluid as it flows, it basically kind of make it larger if the velocity is high, and therefore if it actually increases, then a fluid, because of its elasticity, is also kind of try to contract, and which basically influences the flow. So this is basically immerse boundary method coupled with fluid structure interaction, where the wall is not a constant wall, but the wall is basically kind of flexible in nature. So these kind of problems are very much, I will say, it's very much applicable in case of biological flows, where there's an interaction between the solid wall and the fluid itself. And here we can also see the mean wall shear stress distribution for one cardiac cycle. So if your heart is beating, it is pumping out blood, it will going to put a pressure on this capillaries itself, and therefore you should have the pressure. You can find out the pressure distribution of the velocity field, the pressure distribution on the shear stress on the surface of the this artery, and also inside the fluid itself, and you can also find out the velocity field inside these arteries. And as a boundary condition, you will put this mostly boundary condition on the surface of the wall, but the wall itself is moving kind of a thing. That's why I call it to be a FSI IBM problem. So instead of a static wall, we see in case of a reactor vessel or a bubble column or a fluid aspect. So these kind of problems are a bit different. So the list goes on. So there are consumer goods like blow molding, baby care, coating, extrusion, dye design, fuel cell modeling, glass processing, made in offshore industries, flow modeling. Different kind of applications are there in case of semiconductor industry. Okay, so, so the list goes on. So you can solve, since most of the things actually are composed of fluid and solid, you can basically solve it by using CFD. So this is actually one of the things. But yes, as said by asked by Soren earlier, it is important that you know how to code, because one of the thing is that if you are going to solve this problem alongside code, you have to parallelize it. So you have to run it on multiple cores, and nowadays they are running on GPUs also, that is graphic processing unit, instead of CPUs. So those things uh, you should learn. Otherwise, you don't get the full the flavor of the whole thing. So I think I'm done as of now. So, do you have any questions until now regarding the course and all the things regarding the course and the slides? Yes, Arpan. Assignments will be simple in nature. So, what I will, the one book I will kind of suggest you to refer is basically the book by Vostik Malasekar on CFD, Computational Fluid Dynamics. So that thing you can go through. You can see the assignments. Those assignments which are uh, given in the exercise that I will give you. The coding is not done yet. I will ask you to code that thing in MATLAB and then show it to you. So assignments will be like heat transfer in a flat plate, in a straight bar by using different kind of numerical schemes. Whether you are seeing a kind of on physical nature or convergence or divergence. Uh, Flow solving a flow field by using simple algorithm. Those kind of things. I'm going to ask you to. So yeah, I will go. I will actually show you some sample coding, so you actually get a good good hold of how the whole thing goes. Because the basic structure remains the same. So what you have to do is first you have to divide the whole domain into multiple cells that I actually showed you. What I do is basically I take a domain, for example, a box, and then I divide the whole domain into multiple cells. And then what I do is basically I solve the Navier-Stokes equation and the continuity equation in each and every cell. And for example, if it's a basic heat transport equation or heat conduction in a solid, that will be heat transport equation. And rho Cp dT equals to K del squared T dx squared. So if it's a 1D heat equation, transient in nature. And if there is a source term, that will be plus S. So that you have to discretize for each and every cells, and then you have to convert that into a system of algebraic equation. So from there you will basically convert that into a system of linear algebraic equation. So that will be converted into a matrix. So from there you have to find what is A, what is B, and then you have to find X because X equals to A inverse B. So by that way you can do it. That's how you build it. It's the basic structure remains the same. So do others have any questions? Uh, Rushikesh, Sachin, Mokshil, Utkarsh, Arpan, Anirudh. Hmm, I think I can also uh, type out the the name of the books. Uh, this one. This book you should follow. An introduction to computational fluid dynamics by Borstic. This you will find some typical assignments here. This book is freely available, so you can go through it and then you can basically code these assignments. I will give you a proper assignment statement for it, that how to do it. So that thing you can do. And there is another safety book I will kind of hello, it got disconnected. So another thing I will, yeah, this book is also required. So computational fluid dynamics by uh, JD. This one is John D. Anderson. This book is required, and another book is basically this you can go through. This is also, I think, Introduction to Computational Fluid Dynamics by Atul Sharma. And this book is also good. Notes on Computational Fluid Dynamics by Green, Shields, and Weller. It's Christopher E. J. Winchell and इसको नीचे कर लेता हूँ H. G. Weller. ठीक ये बुक आई थिंक देख सकते हैं these books are I think four of them will be sufficient as of now you can have a screenshot of it let me think what other books can cater to your taste हाँ ये वाला बुक पढ़ सकते हो ये वाला अच्छा है this one is good one this one is computational methods for fluid dynamics by J H ये वाला book is last वाला book this will give you a numerical aspect of CFD I think these are the books will be sufficient for you for this course. Uh, do you have any question? Hello, am I audible? Yeah, you can take a screenshot of these books. So let's look at it. This is one, this is two, this is three, this is four. Uh, Let me move it so that you can have a good picture of it. So, how many people are they actually had a prior course on safety? So, can you raise your hand? Sachin. So, So what are the things you learned in safety? Okay, okay. So you are currently in bachelor's or master's or PhD? PhD. Which institute? Which institute? Oh, in ID Surat. So you started learning CFD using NPTEL, right? From NPTEL. Should I submit what? Can you please repeat? Yeah, 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 yeah. I think you can solve my assignments. My assignments are good enough. Alongside the assignments which are given in NPTEL, so I can help you with both that are given in NPTEL and also the assignments I'm going to give you from my course. But yes, you can submit it to me. Then, if you have any problem, we can discuss over the video lectures or the live sessions we are having, so that I can basically help you with the doubt you are having. Yeah. So this one is a first class and this one is a first week for me. So it actually started at 1 week after the the start of the course itself. So from next week onwards, I am going to derive equations and show it to you that how the whole thing works. Yeah, yeah, no issue. So do others have any comments, any suggestions, any questions? Yeah, yeah, you will get on YouTube. Uh, so I will share the link with you. So you will easily get on YouTube. So in the chat box itself, I will share the link. So for each week, I will basically give you a link for the videos that I'm recording. So I will give it to you. So do others have any question? Hello, am I audible regarding the course, regarding uh, the deliverables, each and everything? All clear. So, in what topic you are working, by the way? One guy actually said that he came across CFD. I think he left the chat or Sachin. Yeah, Sachin. So, what topic you are working on? Hello, am I audible? Yeah, can you speak louder? Yes, you are audible now. Okay, so you are basically saying that how the temperature changes on a composite or something like that, if I'm getting it right. Okay, 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 I understood. I got it. So, what applications is composites are going to use? Some spacecraft or aerospace applications you are going to get it for? Okay, okay, I got it, I got it. So, can you speak louder a bit? Your voice is getting broken. Yeah, yeah, it is audible. No issue. Okay. So, you're planning to use ANSYS Fluent for your PhD. Okay, so you're planning to write your own code, and then that's a good thing. That's a good. So, Muhammad, Mokshil, Utkarsha, Anirudh, any questions or any kind of things you want to have in this course so that it is beneficial for you? Yeah, yeah. Am I audible? Oh, so do you want anything in this course itself that will help, that will be helpful for you? That's what I'm asking. Okay. Yeah, yeah. The email ID, I think that's being shared with you, right? My email ID. Okay. So if you have any issue, you can bring it up in the class or you can send me an email. I don't know whether the email ID is there or not. I can put it in the this Microsoft Teams chat. So there you can basically discuss that. Uh, you can basically send me the questions that you are having issue. with. So I hope most of the people are not having any questions. So I think today's class is done as of now. So let's meet next week, and I will provide you the link of the YouTube video and also the email ID so that we can you can have your doubts cleared and also access to the videos, the recorded lectures. So bye everyone. I think it is done. Okay. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Okay. No issue.